Gun violence is one of the most vexing issues of our time, causing countless and repeated tragedies throughout our country. Some of you may have heard the news today that there was actually another mass shooting this morning in Maryland. It is incredible to think that since the tragic loss of 26 children and teachers at Sandy Hook Elementary School in 2012, our government has made little to no significant progress toward nationwide sensible gun laws. I'm Mother Caroline Stacey, the Rector or Senior Pastor of St. Luke in the Fields, and tonight we are joined by honored guests and performers that care deeply about this issue. Francisco J. Nunez and the Young People's Chorus of New York City, Kurt Andersen, John Rosenthal, Mark Erelli, and Grammy Award-winning singer and songwriter Rosanne Cash, who has been a vocal advocate for sensible gun laws for over 20 years. Please welcome Rosanne Cash, Kurt Andersen, John Rosenthal, and Mark Erelli.
Thank you. Thank you, Mother Stacey, and to Lynn Brewster and this whole team at St. Luke's for offering this forum and for their incredible community outreach for as long as I've known them, which is almost 30 years. And this is a terribly ironic and yet perfect day to have this event only 10 hours after another mass shooting, this time in Maryland. Apart from the newspaper offices, the restaurants, the nightclubs, movie theaters, and other public spaces which have been sites of gun violence in recent years, there were 65 school shootings in 2017 in America. There have been 61 so far in 2018. 3,155 children under the age of 19 were killed by guns in 2016. We can grieve together, we can rage at the corporate gun lobby and our leaders in Congress, and according to new information, also in the executive branch, who are beholden to that lobby. But we need more than like minds, shared grief, and collective outrage. We need all that plus action and activism that arises from deep within us, from the certainty of recognizing an extreme moral crisis. I want to give you a brief overview of my history with this cause. When the Columbine shooting happened, I was watching the coverage of it on television with my then 17-year-old daughter, and I said, "How did these kids get the guns?" And my daughter looked at me like I was crazy, and she said, "Mom, I could get a gun easier than I could buy cigarettes." And this is in New York City, where we pride ourselves on making it more difficult to procure guns than other states. I felt in that moment that I had failed a crucial mandate of motherhood. I grew up in a large extended family with a lot of powerful women and dozens of children, and the unspoken rule was that if you were a grown-up in the room with children, it didn't matter if they were yours or not. You ensured their safety, you set limits, you treated them like your own until you passed them back to their parents. We are the grown-ups in the room, and we are failing a central mandate of civilization. We work and save to educate our children, we guide them, we helicopter parent like crazy, we pass laws to put safety locks on aspirin bottles, to prohibit poisonous flame retardant in baby clothes. We have endless laws governing the safety of toys and playground equipment and the use of car seats and so much more. But you can have a loaded, unlocked gun in a home with a toddler. And we allow a disturbed 17-year-old to procure a rapid-fire military-style assault weapon. We've lost our minds. We've made a mockery of what we say are our priorities. and we must reorder them. This is not because of a glitch in the Second Amendment that this is happening, which, by the way, is subject to revision like any other amendment in the Constitution. This is because of the domination of American culture by extremists. And Kurt Andersen will speak on how the corporate gun lobby exploited a certain American weakness for make-believe. So after Columbine, at the suggestion of my friend Rachel Desario, who's here tonight, I joined the board of an organization called PAX, whose sole purpose was to protect children from gun violence. And we worked hard to establish some grassroots initiatives like a campaign to get parents to ask if there was a gun in the house before sending their child for a play date. Then in 2000, I went to the Million Mom March in Washington, and I wrote about it for Rolling Stone magazine. I felt really energized by the march, and I just knew in my heart that things would change that day, that Congress would take notice, unshackle themselves from the gun lobby. But at the end of that day, looking out at this sea of parents carrying posters with pictures of the children they had lost to gun violence, a friend said to me, "Well, if nothing else, we help carry the burden of the grieving moms for one day." And it turns out that's mostly what we did, the only thing we did. Nothing changed. Mass shootings have intensified, in fact. I continued to write about gun violence, perform at benefits and galas, march and protest. One time I laid down in Times Square with a group of other women, which, ooh, don't do that. And donate to candidates strong on gun control. But after a decade, I quit PAX because I just couldn't meet one more grieving parent. It was crushing me. Then my daughter, the same one whose comment had been a wake-up call for me, was held up at gunpoint. A gun was held to her head for 20 minutes in a store where she worked. We were lucky. She wasn't shot. But I realized that the difference between me and those moms carrying pictures of their children was a split second. The difference between all of us and the parents of the kids at Columbine, Sandy Hook, Parkland, Virginia Tech, so many more, the difference between all of us and those killed at a Las Vegas festival, a church in Charleston, a movie theater in Colorado, a nightclub in Florida, the difference is a split second. But we are not helpless. As Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, is the only thing that ever has. And we are not a small group. There are legions of people who feel as we do, who are horrified and heartbroken. And we can harness our collective energy, educate ourselves about which legislators take money from the gun lobby and which don't, and vote at the polls with our dollars and on our feet. We can use our helicopter parenting skills to buzz Congress and not let up. There's a list of resources in your program, and John Rosenthal will speak about how his persistence helped change the laws in Massachusetts to make it the state with the most effective gun laws in the nation. I thank you so much for coming out this evening. And I want to introduce you to the Young People's Chorus of New York City and YPC's founder and artistic director, Francisco Nunez. He's a MacArthur Fellow, a Musical America's 2018 Educator of the Year. He's actually a big hero of mine. His energy and dedication is unbelievable. So YPC is celebrating the 30th anniversary this year, and over the past 3 decades has been a strong advocate musically, academically, socially for any child of any cultural, economic background. And at the same time, YPC has become a beacon of diversity and inclusion, as well as a powerful example of the artistic heights young people are capable of reaching, both here in New York City and throughout the world. Please help me give a warm welcome to the fantastic Young People's Chorus of New York City, Francisco Nunez, and pianist John Holden. Young People's Chorus, and Francisco Nunez. Francisco actually has about 2,000 kids he works with. I know very few people as dedicated as he is. Quite an amazing man. I'd like to introduce to you a man. I met John Rosenthal at the Concert Across America to End Gun Violence several years ago, a concert that he produced simultaneously in 35 cities with 5,200 musicians. And he continues to do that every year now. He's a businessman, a responsible gun owner, and the leader of the most successful gun violence prevention program in the country. Please welcome John Rosenthal.
Great to be here. And as Roseanne said, I am a business person and a gun owner. I skeet shoot, I have shotguns, and I don't hunt, but I have. One thing that made a big difference in talking with legislators was that I was a business person and a gun owner. And we helped change the conversation. In 1994, when we started Stop Handgun Violence, that year, 106 Americans a day died from gun violence, 40,000 a year. And between then and now, 850,000 Americans have died from gun violence. That's at an average of about 35,000 a year. And that number dawned on me when my wife and family and kids and neighbors were all at the March for Our Lives in Washington. And we were shoulder to shoulder in February or March, from the White House to the Capitol. And I was doing interviews from Boston radio stations and talking about the number of people there, and then it just dawned on me. We were shoulder to shoulder from the White House to the Capitol, 840,000 Americans fighting for sane gun laws, and that's the same number of dead bodies from largely preventable gun violence since we started this effort in 1994. And today, 8 kids that woke up will be dead tonight. 90 to 100 Americans will die today, and a kid will be shot every 30 minutes from a uniquely unregulated product. Yet in Massachusetts, since 1994, we've enacted comprehensive gun laws. Just like we regulate automobiles, we regulate guns. Training, licensing, safe storage. We hold the gun industry accountable. They can't sell guns in the state without meeting certain safety features. We require background checks for all gun sales, not just through not through federally licensed dealers that have to run a background check, but 50% of all guns sold in this country today and every day are sold by private gun dealers without an ID or a background check in 32 states. We ban military-style weapons and large-capacity ammunition magazines, the common denominator in the daily mass shootings, and there was another one today. In fact, there's a mass shooting of 4 or more people every single day in our country. The majority of people, of the 90 to 100 that will die today, will die from handguns largely. 2/3 will be suicides, largely with access to a weapon that they didn't own, like a temporarily insane teenager or a toddler that gets access to a loaded and unlocked gun. Most gun violence is preventable, and what we did in Massachusetts is just hold gun owners, dealers, gun manufacturers, and law enforcement accountable without banning anything except for assault weapons and large-capacity ammunition magazines. And we have reduced the rate of gun deaths by 40%, and our urban state of Massachusetts has the lowest gun death rate in the nation. You know, and again, we did it by changing the conversation from banning guns or unlimited access to guns, the polar extremes, to how are kids, criminals, the dangerously mentally ill, and even international terrorist groups come to the United States to buy guns because they can. I mean, Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah were caught buying guns at Michigan gun shows, and they weren't caught buying the guns because it's perfectly legal to buy guns at gun shows without an ID or background check. They got caught shipping them back to the Middle East. You know, if you want to buy a toy gun in this country, you can't buy a toy gun without it being made with safety features, believe it or not. The little red dot at the end of a barrel of a toy, that is a federal requirement. It can't be sold without it. You want to buy a real gun? No regulations, no manufacturing standards, no background check in 32 states. Teddy bears have regulations, real guns do not. If you hunt in this country, in any state in the country, you need a license. And if you hunt deer, you're limited to 5 rounds in your weapon. If you hunt duck, you're limited to 3 rounds to protect the duck and deer population. But you can buy an AR-15 with a 30 to 100 round magazine or an easily concealed handgun without a license or a background check. What people don't realize is that we have gun violence by design. Increase gun sales without detection, increase gun violence, increase fear, increase mass shootings, increase more fear, and gun sales. Gun sales will go up as a result of the mass shooting today. They go up after every single mass shooting. And depending on the weapon used. So the weapon of choice for mass shooters is the AR-15. It was used at Sandy Hook to kill 20 babies and 6 teachers. You know, you can only imagine how many parents of dead children I've met in 24 years. I mean, we don't have the gene to bury our children and ever be the same. And I'll tell you, you know, when you meet parents of dead 6 and 7-year-olds, it's rough. Especially when they tell you that they had to identify their children by their clothing because they received 3 to 11 rounds with an AR-15 military-style weapon and a 223 round that is designed to maximize soft tissue damage, to tumble, not penetrate. And the kids had to be identified by their clothing. And that weapon is legal across the country without an ID or background check. It is the weapon of choice. It was used at Sandy Hook. It was used at San Bernardino. It was used at Aurora, Colorado. And even I thought, eventually, you know, I was asked on MSNBC after Sandy Hook, I was on with General McChrystal, who described what the AR-15 is designed to do. It's a civilian version of an M16. And I was asked, is this finally going to be it? I mean, 26 and 7-year-olds. And I said, no. I mean, 32 at Virginia Tech, I mean, 36 at Columbine. But I said, you know, maybe if 20 members of Congress were killed in their chairs versus 20 babies in theirs in elementary school, but I don't even know if that would happen. But I went on to say, maybe if 100 or 200 people are shot at the same time, Congress would care. Folks, Las Vegas, 550 Americans shot in minutes, 58 dead, 850 wounded that day. Massachusetts was the only state that banned the bump stock, which is an aftermarket thing that just basically makes a semi-automatic an automatic. So, the good news is we've proven that gun laws work. The good news is if you look at every single state with tougher gun laws, they have lower gun death rates than every single state with no gun laws. There are more of us than there are of them. But I will tell you, having done this for a long time, unless we become as passionate as the gun rights groups, and these are racist, anti-Semitic, hate-mongering. I mean, at one point, my face was plastered all over the internet by a musician, Ted Nugent, board member of the NRA, saying Jews are responsible for gun control, shut them down, with 12 prominent Jewish people, including me and Bloomberg. And yeah, we get threats, but these are largely cowards. We need to be as passionate. We need to single-issue vote. We need to support the March for Our Lives movement, because guess what, folks? We have failed our children beyond miserably. Our generation has allowed this to happen. Our generation has not held members of Congress accountable. Our generation has created an environment where kids are legitimately afraid to go to school. It's on us. And so it's on us to support the March for Our Lives. We marched, we had 50 kids from Parkland, and it was a made in Massachusetts Smith & Wesson AR-15 used at Parkland, and Aurora, Colorado, and San Bernardino. So the kids from Parkland and parents of dead kids from Parkland came up to Massachusetts. We marched from Worcester to Springfield a couple of weeks ago. It was a 50-mile walk, and we ended up at Smith & Wesson, and 99% of the people along the way waved American flags, senior citizens, old and young, in lily-white communities, applauding us until we got to Smith & Wesson. And folks, I mean, even I couldn't comprehend this one. I mean, across the whole street as we approached Smith & Wesson were the Trump hats, the red hats, the Trump banners, and neo-Nazi flags, yelling at the kids and parents of dead kids because they simply want to reduce injuries and deaths without banning guns. They simply want to feel safe in schools. And so this November, the March for Our Lives kids, and every election after that, these are kids like David Hogg and Emma Gonzalez. They can't even vote. They're not going to vote until 2020. So it is on us to support them. So Stop Handgun Violence's whole mission, our goal was to reduce injuries and deaths without banning most guns. We did it. We're an urban state. We get the lowest gun death rate in the nation. New York isn't far behind. California, New Jersey, I mean, they're good laws, but we need uniform national laws. The only way that's ever going to happen is if we change Congress and we change the amoral idiot in the White House. And every day we don't, every year we don't, the bodies are just piling up, and none of us are safe. So in the back of the room is sort of information about how we did it, the billboards that we created, the laws that we created with bipartisan support. I mean, Mitt Romney signed our permanent ban on assault weapons and large capacity ammunition magazines. Another Republican passed our first in the nation consumer protection standards for the gun industry. This is possible. We are the only country that has this problem. And after every mass shooting, you'll hear, oh, the Second Amendment doesn't allow it. No, Scalia wrote for the majority that the Second Amendment protects guns in the common use at the time of the founders. That was black powder, single shot. He even went on to say, and I'm not talking about sawed-off shotguns or assault weapons. They didn't exist. Then you hear, oh, it's just mental illness. It's not the gun. Sorry, but every country has mentally ill people. We're the only one that arms them with military-style weapons without detection. And the other thing you hear is gun laws don't work. Well, every single state like Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, California, I mean, there's a bunch of them. You compare them with states with no gun laws, and it's irrefutable. Gun laws save lives. But we live in a democracy that we have rapidly given up to special interests. It's on us, folks, to get our democracy back, vote, be passionate, vote on the gun issue, and support the March for Our Lives. Student movements in this country have changed policy, whether it's civil rights or the environment or divestiture. I mean, there's a long history. The war in Vietnam. People said it couldn't be done. Kids did it. You all were part of that. Then we got really lazy and really complacent. We gotta get active again. And please get in touch with us at Stop Handgun Violence or pull me aside anytime and do something, because none of us are safe as a result of bad public policy designed to sell guns, which is having disastrous public health outcomes.
Thank you, John. That is a call to action. And in case I forget to tell you, there is a place to make donations to Stop Handgun Violence at the back. I want to introduce you to a friend, a fairly new friend. I met him on Twitter. He tweeted at me that he had written a song about an anti-gun violence song. Now, I don't usually click a link on someone who sends me a song on Twitter, but for some reason I did, and then I was in tears listening to this song, this beautiful song he wrote. And he invited me to sing it with him at the Brady Campaign Gala a few years ago, and we did. And since then he's become a friend, and he's a beautiful soul, beautiful singer-songwriter. Please welcome Mark Erelli.
Thank you so much. It is a privilege to be here this evening, truly. I'm a songwriter. Songs are mysterious things. I don't write hardly ever from a place of absolutely knowing anything. I find that the questions are far more interesting. And so necessarily every song I write, especially the ones that are politically minded or grappling with social issues, protest songs, if you want to call them that, I don't plant a flag on one side of an issue usually and say, listen to me, I know all the answers. I like to try and find common ground and consensus and try and find a way to bring people together through a song, not to alienate people on one side of the issue that may think differently. And I'm human, I'm not perfect. I'm not as perfect as the narrator in my song, even though I get to sing his words. I sing these songs as a bit of a call to action for myself in order to be, to live up to the words that I'm singing and to be that guy. So this is one of those kinds of songs. It's called Abraham. Oh, Abraham, how far the mighty we have fallen, how I pray you hear me calling in the hour of despair. It's a promised land where every promise has been broken, where every vote feels like a token for a ride that goes nowhere. Rise up, rise up, rise up. Oh, the words you spoke of a far more perfect union, reaching out to the disillusion, still set our souls to sing. But what of hope are we needing now more than ever? And I keep believing listening for feathers, but I hear the flap of leathery wings. So rise up, rise up. We've more in common than divides us, but we need someone to guide us through the sorrow and the shadows we have sown. Oh, Abraham, rise up from your marble throne. Oh, Abraham, gazing out over the fountain, sitting silent as a mountain, say it wasn't all in vain. But I understand why another wise man won't come forward when all the others were rewarded with a bullet in the brain. So rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up, rise. Rise up. We more in common than divides us, but we need someone to guide us, for we've never felt so lost and so alone. Oh, Abraham, rise up from your marble throne. Oh, Abraham, rise up, rise up. Thank you so much. Do you one more here, and we'll get back to the people that really know what they're talking about. This is that song was an older song. That's 10 years old now. This one is a brand new one that I've played exactly once, and that first time was last night. So theoretically, I've rehearsed. This is called Rose-Colored Rear View. There was a time when we all watched the same screen. Springsteen was mainstream. Everybody had a hungry heart. There was a time you might not get rich, but you could make a living. A 40-hour weekend, a 2-day weekend could get you pretty far. Was there a time, or was it only in my mind, when everything seemed simpler and we all sat down for dinner every night? Or am I old this rose-colored rear view. There was a time when this town felt like family. I could ride my bike down any street, and somebody always knew my name. There was a time before the mills pulled out and the pails moved in, but we didn't need no medicine just to take away the pain. Was there a time, or was it only in my mind, when everything seemed simpler and we all sat down in her every night? Or am I only looking through this rose-colored rear view? There was a time when we all pledged allegiance, and we thought we knew what we meant when we turned to face the flag. Are we blind? This ain't one nation under God, when taking a knee or a traffic stop can kill you if your skin is black. Was there a time, or was it only in my mind, when everything seemed simpler and we all sat down in her every night? Or am I only looking through this rose-colored rear view? Thank you so much.
Mark Erelli. Beautiful, Mark. Thank you. Kurt Andersen's mind is one of the places I most like to visit. And he's been raising the level of discourse in this city and in this country for decades. He's a true Renaissance man in the way he thinks, the way he writes, the way he is in the world. And his new book, Fantasyland, is sobering and thrilling at the same time, and a wake-up call as well. Please welcome my friend, Kurt Andersen.
Thank you. This book that Rose mentioned, Fantasyland, is the first nonfiction book, big one I've written, and it's a book about America, all kinds of American propensities for believing in all sorts of exciting, untrue things, which I believe have gotten out of control and got us to a bad place. The magical thinking, the supernaturalism, the denial of science, the crazy conspiracies, all of it. But, as I say in the book, one set of fantasies has had more current, awful undeniable real-world consequence than any other. And that is the recasting that has happened in just the last few decades of owning guns as among the most important rights in America. That the gun ownership, the more the merrier, has become a definition of American liberty and individualism for lots of people. In our lifetime, my lifetime anyway, gun love, that kind of gun love has become a kind of fetish and a pathology in this country. I grew up in Nebraska. Like John, I knew guns. As a kid, I was little kid, I was armed with a BB gun all the time, graduated to 22 rifles. As an adult, I've hunted turkey, which I enjoyed, probably because I failed to hit one. And I enjoy, like John, shooting skeet. I get the fun of guns. In hunting is not pure fantasy. You shoot a pheasant, you eat it. But over the last few decades, Americans, in fact, have lost their taste for hunting. Only 15% of us now hunt, ever, which is less than half as many as hunted in the 1970s. In any given year, only a third of those people hunt, 5% of Americans. In fact, believe it or not, fewer of us now own any kind of gun, even as the number of guns Americans own has increased phenomenally. In the 1970s, about half of Americans had a gun, and it was almost always just a gun, an average close to one. But today, the average owner of a gun in America has 3 or 4 of them, and a tiny group of us, 3% of all American adults, own half of the 300 million guns in America. 3%, half of all those guns. And that's because the members of that tiny minority of super enthusiasts own an average of 17 guns apiece. And that's because, I believe, many of them, maybe most, have given themselves over to this fantasy that guns enable and provide. The way I did as a kid, they imagined that they're militiamen or pioneers or cowboys in the Wild West or soldiers or characters that they've watched on TV and movies their whole lives, like Clint Eastwood or The Rock or Butch or Sundance or Rambo or Neo. You take your pick. They are like children playing with Star Wars lightsabers, except these weapons kill, and they believe they're prepared to fight off real-life stormtroopers and real-life aliens. Why do Americans buy AR-15s and semi-automatic rifles like it more than any other style of gun? 1.5 million guns last year, another 1.5 million AR-15s this year, because holding and shooting one makes them feel cooler. Almost like a commando, like a character in an action movie. It's the same reason that half of the states in America do not require a license for people to carry guns openly. Because for the gun-owning fantasists, it feels so much more badass to have it open. Spectacular mass killings happen in America far more often than anywhere else, and not just because we make massacre-perfect weapons so easy to buy. Mass killers often, the experts tell us, are motivated by our besetting national dream of celebrity, instant celebrity. The experts say that most mass killers are not psychotics or paranoid schizophrenics in the throes of clinical delusion. They are unhappy people who, with failures they blame on others, or the system, or the elitists, or the world. They worry those resentments into sensational fantasies of vengeance. They get guns because we make it so impossibly easy, as John explained, and they know that acting out those fantasies will force the rest of us to pay attention to them for the first time. Beyond the free-floating American myths underlying American gun love, there are specific scenarios driving today's anti-gun regulation ferocity. The least fantastical is the idea that if a criminal attacks you tomorrow, you want a gun handy to shoot him. That's the main reason gun owners give for owning a gun. And that reason, in the surveys, has doubled since the 1990s, even though since the 1990s, the chance of an American finding herself or himself in that position has plummeted by half. Here in New York City, where we of course have some of the most restrictive gun ownership and carrying laws in the United States, the chance of being killed is 81% less than it was in 1990. And these dozens of new state laws that really itch for those make my day citizen showdowns, concealed carry, stand your ground, have been driven in such large measure by these fearful fantasies. By the way, among the 1 million, actually more than 1 million Americans interviewed in over 10 recent years in the federal crime victimization surveys, 1 million, more than 1 million, exactly one sexual assault victim used a gun in self-defense. But then there are the various complete fantasies beyond individual self-protection that drive the politics of gun control, like the one that Marco Rubio and President Trump have trotted out, that in case of an attack by jihadi terrorists here in the US, random armed civilians will save the day. Another is the fantasy that once the US government fully reveals itself as a tyrannical, socialist, globalist regime, civilian patriots will be obliged to become terrorist rebels to defend liberty. This uprising scenario, when it appeared, as far as I know, in this country in a big way back in the 1960s, really stirred people only on the furthest fringes of the right and the left of American politics. But it is now deep in the mainstream, this fantasy, thanks to the National Rifle Association. How did that happen? When the founders wrote the Constitution, they envisioned a very small permanent national military. If the United States needed to fight wars against foreign enemies, the states would assemble ad hoc civilian armed forces. And so the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. For more than 2 centuries, the Supreme Court really refrained from making any sweeping decisions about the Second Amendment and what it means today. It just didn't come up that much. It's like the Third Amendment, the one that forbids quartering soldiers in people's houses in peacetime. It was an artifact of another era. But then in the late 1970s, after the hysterical fantasist faction of the NRA took it over and transformed the organization, it became the center of a powerful new political movement that for the first time opposed any and all regulation of firearms. The types and numbers of guns and accessories and ammunition that people could buy, who could buy them, and how easily, even rules about using security locks. Nevertheless, in the 1990s, Congress still managed to enact 2 federal laws, the one requiring most gun buyers to pass FBI background checks, and another that banned the manufacture of some semi-automatic guns and of gigantic ammunition magazines. In response to those laws, the NRA sent out an exceptionally hysterical 10-page letter to its members that showed who they are, what they are. The new assault weapons ban, this letter said, gives jackbooted government thugs more power to take away our constitutional rights, break down our doors, seize our guns, destroy our property, and even injure and kill us. Not too long ago, it was unthinkable for federal agents wearing Nazi bucket helmets and black stormtrooper uniforms to attack law-abiding citizens. And soon, they'll be taking away everyone's right to free speech, free practice of religion, and every other freedom in the Bill of Rights. That letter seemed demented even to a lot of Republicans at the time, dozens of whom had just voted for the assault weapons ban. The first President Bush, as a result of that letter, resigned from the NRA in protest. But the zealots did not rethink or walk it back a bit. They, by that time, were dominating the political process concerning gun regulation, but now they sought total victory. They needed to convince a majority of the Supreme Court to ratify their everybody's a militiaman interpretation of the Second Amendment, which still seemed improbable in the 1990s. In the 1990s, the former Chief Justice, Warren Burger, the conservative appointed by Richard Nixon, said of the Second Amendment, It has been the subject of one of the greatest pieces of fraud, I repeat the word fraud, on the American public by special interest groups that I have ever seen in my lifetime. But when the ban on semi-automatic weapons expired, it was only a decade long when it was passed in '94, it expired in 2004, and it was not renewed. And even more amazingly in this century, what Chief Justice Burger had denounced as a fraud became respectable jurisprudence. In 2008 and 2010, the Supreme Court finally agreed to decide the fundamental meaning of the Second Amendment as they had not done before. 4 of the justices still interpreted it the old way, the way that it had obtained for decades, for centuries. In one of those cases, for instance, those key cases, Justice Breyer wrote that back in 1791, his dissent said, the framers did not write the Second Amendment in order to protect any private right of armed self-defense. But in both cases, 5 justices went with the new reading. And now our Constitution, for now, does indeed guarantee each of us the right to own firearms. We can argue all we want about how different guns were in the 1790s than now, when in the 1790s it took a full minute to fire 3 shots if you were good at reloading. The NRA has won, for now. Yet they are the sorest winners. They sound no less paranoid or angry. They're still convinced that tyranny is around the corner and federal agents are coming for their guns. Even though the wholesale confiscation of guns has never been seriously bruited in the United States. And even most conservatives into the 1980s considered that paranoid screwball beliefs. But now, thanks to the NRA, it is the rare Republican leader who doesn't encourage that confiscation, take your guns, outlaw your guns fantasy. So now, instead of ignoring the first half of the Second Amendment, the militia part, as it had always done before, the NRA and the gun rights movement embraced the idea that civilians need their guns for possible future guerrilla operations, and finally got the Supreme Court to agree. One of those decisive opinions says that the Second Amendment allows guns so that citizens may spontaneously form militias to fight a civil war. Those are my words, not Justice Scalia's, who wrote, the Second Amendment exists to make the able-bodied men of this nation better able to resist tyranny, to join in armed resistance to the depredations of a tyrannical government. In other words, to shoot and kill members, these are my words, of a U.S. standing army they don't like. His Supreme Court majority opinion acknowledged that such a contingency is absurd, given that, his words, a militia today, to be as effective as militias in the 18th century, would require sophisticated arms and that no amount of small arms could be useful against modern-day bombers and tanks. But so be it. The Constitution now, according to those 2 rulings, gives every American the unlimited right to amass an arsenal to be ready to enact that doomed fantasy someday. Are the gun zealots like dogs who finally catch the car but won't stop barking and snarling? Because they still want more. They still demand more. And they have to fantasize harder than ever for things that outrage or frighten them. Last year, on the same day President Trump addressed the right wing's big annual CPAC conference, so did Wayne LaPierre, the head of the NRA for the last 27 years. He and they have won, as I've said. So in order to keep the madness going, LaPierre started presenting at that CPAC conference an even crazier new fantasy of self-defense. Right now, he said, we face a gathering of forces that are willing to use violence against us. Some of the most radical political elements there are: anarchists, Marxists, communists, and the whole rest of the left-wing socialist brigade. Does he know this is madness? Is he really itching for a civil war, or are his horrific movie trailer visions just good for business? Make no mistake, he said at that conference last year, it is if the violent left brings their terror into our homes, they will be met with the full force of American freedom in the hands of the American people, and we will win. And that, unfortunately, is the most dangerous alternative reality in Fantasyland, which, in addition to John Rosenthal's great work and everything he said to do, we must fight by simply insisting on the realities of the needless, gratuitous deaths that our strange American fetish for guns permits. Thank you very much.
Why don't you gentlemen, Kurt and John, we'll just stand up here and do, I think you've gotten a lot of information. We were going to do a panel, but we'll just do a question and answer. And I think they have microphones in the audience. If anyone has a question, don't ask me any wonky questions. You can ask these guys those. Yes, this lady with the orange scarf.
I always wonder if anyone who is in the NRA has lost a child or knows or has a relative who has lost a child. Would that make a difference?
The question was, if anyone in the NRA had the loss of a child, would they change? Is that the question? I think that's John
I
Rosenthal.
can't imagine it hasn't happened. I mean, look at the congressperson who was shot at a Congress softball field. He came back raging in support of, unrestricted access to guns. Right before Las Vegas, Paul Ryan and the Republican-controlled Congress voted to allow for anyone who bought a gun in any state to bring it to every state. So it's called concealed carry reciprocity, would undermine every single gun law. And they were about to vote on deregulating silencers, which have been regulated since the 30s, because along with machine guns, so they wanted to make it easier to kill without detection. So, even members of Congress who have been shot, and we've seen presidents get shot, we've seen members of Congress get, we've seen Capitol Police get shot, Congress doesn't care. So my guess is I'm sure people have lost children to gun violence, and they would just say, oh, if I had a gun, maybe I could have stopped it.
I have to say that after Las Vegas happened, one of the musicians who was performing that day contacted me, and he said, I've awakened. He said, I used to be like those guys. He said, I was wrong, this is wrong. But that is not, that's the exception. That doesn't happen very often, as far as I can tell. This gentleman here.
I haven't seen too much coverage of this, but in terms of the dollars that these guns cost, in terms of injury, we talk about the fatalities, but what about all the injured, and then the economic ramifications for those families that have lost producers? And so as a business person, as an economics person, these numbers must be billions of dollars.
They are. The average gunshot death is $33,000, and the average gunshot injury is $333,000. And it turns into, so today, 90 to 100 will be shot, and will die, and 250 will be shot today. And 80% of them will be uninsured. So it's not just the families, but it's all of us who are paying for it. It's in the billions and billions and billions a year.
One of the lines in Fantasyland that I repeat a lot is a great line from Thomas Jefferson. He was specifically talking about how the government should not regulate religion, because I don't care if a man believes in no gods or 20 gods, as long as it doesn't pick my pocket or break my leg, fine. But exactly that fact about guns is the problem. They pick our pockets and break our legs, and worse, every day.
And guess what? we support them. The weapon used at Sandy Hook is a Bushmaster AR-15, owned by Remington, which is owned by Cerberus Capital Management. The three-headed dog guarding the gates of hell, private equity firm on Wall Street in your town. So, they also own Star Market, Shaw's Market, Osco, Safeway. You're supporting them. Vote with your wallets. Pay attention to where you buy your goods. Pay
Shame
attention.
them.
Exactly.
Yeah, shame him. That's good. Rachel.
I have a wonky question. Sorry, Rose. But, so I'm just curious what the gun control groups and lobby would see as sort of the best, almost possible path forward. Like if Congress was to, the Democrats were to take control, what's the top of the wish list or to-do list?
So it's really replicating successful models. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Massachusetts, New York, California, Connecticut, Maryland. We've gone the furthest by being the first state in the nation to regulate guns as an inherently dangerous product. But, I mean, this March for Our Lives kids have gotten it right. They're saying we don't need to ban guns in order to prevent most gun violence. We need universal background checks for all gun sales. We need to increase the age for buying weapons to 21, and we need to ban military-style assault weapons and large-capacity ammunition magazines. And we need to vote. We need to participate in this hard-fought democracy that we have taken for granted. And, listening to Kurt, I was reminded by a book that I love, a book that Bill Bryson wrote. And somewhere in there he said, if you're lucky enough to live to be 90, that's 780,000 hours. That's all we get. And what we do and who we connect with, who we love, who we work with, how we protect our friends and our families is all we get. But we forget that. And, this is very doable. It's proven, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but we have to pay attention to what's working and fight those that are opposed to it. And it's all about money. It's not even about the guns. For the NRA, it's a cultural war. For members of Congress, you'll always have a special interest group. Wayne LaPierre's paid $1 million plus a year to say what he wants to say but members of Congress are buying it. They are choosing blood money campaign contributions over your children and your lives. And the sooner we face that and get involved in our democracy, and that's what these kids are saying.
Do you have something to add to that?
Well, given what you said about what you've done in Massachusetts, it gives the lie to the idea that the only solution is federal. Of course we should have federal solutions. We should need federal background checks and all the rest. But the fact that you've had measurable, obvious success in bringing down gun violence with a set of state laws and regulations shows that we don't have to wait for the perfect. We can do it state by state.
And we've done it on a bipartisan basis. In 1998, a Republican governor. In 2004, a Republican governor, Mitt Romney. In 2014, I was a Democratic governor. And just this year, Charlie Baker, Republican governor. So by not demonizing gun owners, because the majority of gun owners polled support background checks and a ban on assault weapons. There are 80 million gun owners in this country. There are 3 to 4 million members of the NRA. The majority of gun owners don't subscribe to their insanity and their hate. But the majority of us aren't involved.
John.
Powerful voice culturally, right? And like you say, there's a sizable number, if not a dramatic majority number of gun owners who really are not buying into it. Has there ever been a thoughtful, concerted effort to usurp Wayne LaPierre's, or what he represents, his authority and his voice in the NRA, with a more moderating tone of voice, less Keaton fear-monger rhetoric that would tone it down, because their influence is really outsized to the numbers, as you state. And it seems like a no-brainer if it's an organization people can join, you pay your dues, and then you vote. And why has there never been a sort of more organized effort to sort of take him down, as it were?
Yeah, well, Kurt, talked about there was a coup within the NRA. So after, the assassinations of Bobby Kennedy and the president and Martin Luther King, there was a move to ban handguns. And so there was a major coup within two factions of the NRA, and the extremists won. The more moderate guys, the NRA was founded on rifles and sport shooting. It started that way. Yeah, and this is John, it's a particularly hard question because this is the one that got away. So, like in 2004, a former NFL player, Ray Schoenke, played for the Redskins, and I started a national organization called American Hunters and Shooters Association to go after that majority of gun owners that supported the Second Amendment and gun safety, safe storage, didn't use assault weapons, and wanted to protect public lands that are rapidly, we're losing to extraction industries. And we, one of the first things we did is we went and met with Stormin Norman Schwarzkopf. It was after the Gulf War, and he was retiring, and we said, he hated the NRA because it was an Olympic requirement. If you were to join the shooting Olympic team, you had to be a member of the NRA. And Schwarzkopf thought that was ridiculous. He left the NRA like the president did after Oklahoma bombing, where Timothy McVeigh bombed the Murray building in retaliation to Waco, where a pedophile used a .50 caliber weapon and sold guns. So we start this organization. Schwarzkopf says he wants in, but I got to check with some of the boards I'm on. Big Bad Stormin Norman shrunk under the pressure of the NRA and Remington that he was on the board of. But there is a huge opportunity, and the time is right again. And our organization did not survive the politics, but internal and external. But you're right. We need, responsible gun owners to step up. This is not, well, see, the thing with the NRA, it costs the NRA about $100 to get your $35 membership. They lose money on members. They just want the numbers. But Cerberus and Remington and Smith & Wesson, they fund the NRA. That's what they do. And the big enchilada for them was they got immunity from lawsuits from George W. Bush. So, in a democracy, we don't hold the keys to the courthouse when it comes to guns. We do for toy guns if that, has a problem, but not real guns. So, Congress has chosen the NRA over health and safety of us from preventable gun violence. Look, the fact is, if we don't change Congress this November, or if we don't change our Congress, we reap what we sow. There are consequences. And I don't want to ask for a show of hands how many times, you've canvassed or gone door to door or voted, but we need to do a much better job because the small fringe are single issue on this gun issue.
Kurt's chapter in Fantasyland on the history of the NRA is absolutely fascinating. You two are mirroring each other. At the back.
We, in this country, we seem to enjoy language to sort of sloganeer, if you will, and I'm wondering why we don't emphasize that this is really a form of domestic terrorism. And if we were to use, particularly the Democrats, if they were to sort of use that kind of language, maybe it would sort of change the game a little bit and change the urgency of the needs of what it is that we're going after, because we're constantly othering. There's this foreign boogeyman terrorist that is out there, but the real enemy is the domestic enemy, and it's also, I recognize that it's about economics for sure, but I'm also wondering how much does race and gender play into all of this? And I know it's a complicated question, but...
Well, I used exactly that language. I wrote an op-ed for the New York Times about right after the Las Vegas shooting. And I said, the NRA funds domestic terrorism. And that was a radical statement. And to me, it seems so obvious. I cannot begin to tell you the attacks I've received for that statement and the threats as well. They are well defended, no pun intended. And I think if enough of us start saying that, this is domestic terrorism. We shouldn't be afraid of what's coming from outside America. We're being terrorized from within. We need to start saying that out loud, a lot.
You know, 9/11 here in New York, was it 500 people? And look how much money we spent as a country fighting those terrorists. That's a month and a half of gun violence in this country.
That's right.
And what are we doing? And it is race. You know, it became somewhat of an epidemic. Gun violence became an epidemic when white kids in the suburbs were dying. But the majority of gun violence is non-white kids in urban America who can't find a job, but they have unrestricted access to guns. And when I have debated members of the NRA, spokespeople for the NRA, one of the ones that I'll never forget is he said, quote, 4 out of 5 people that die from gun violence in Los Angeles are no loss to society. We should keep them better armed. This is a paid lobbyist of the NRA. That is what we're up against. And again, you know, you got lunatics who are willing to say anything for money, but our Congress, our democracy has chosen that versus simply protecting our kids with, like every other country does, with regard to making it harder, not easier, and let law enforcement know who's buying guns versus no detection.
We'll take one more question and then we'll close out the evening with music.
When we talk about the money involved with arming America, somehow we keep leaving out the entertainment industry and their reverence for violence in film. My son was shot and survived in a gang initiation where the kids were then seen filmed in a video store after the shooting, imitating a movie and reenacting the shooting of my son. So what I want to say is I turn on the TV and turn it off immediately because every single channel shows violent films. How much are you targeting the entertainment industry and the money that is being made from the gratuitous violence that our children and our teenagers are seeing every day?
Do you want to talk about that, Kurt?
Well, there is something to what you say, most definitely. I, for instance, when I was doing the research on the intersections of violence in entertainment and real violence, discovered that the way in which cool gangsters in the 1980s and 90s began holding guns and firing them this way, that was entirely the result of seeing that done in movies and music videos. So there is a way, that way, certainly, in which images in entertainment and video games, of course, do affect violence. There is a great measure of responsibility that people, makers of entertainment, can do. I personally, I think focusing on that as opposed to the actual regulation of guns, it would be, my personal feeling, and maybe John disagrees, would be a misplaced part of the effort. I hear you, and I grant you that people in Hollywood can't say, well, this doesn't have anything to do with it. Of course it has something to do with it. But I think focusing on video games and movies allows the NRA politicians of the world to focus on that rather than the actual regulations that are required.
And the common denominator in all the shootings is access to the firearm. Every country has violent movies, some more than others. You know, if you do a comparison between even Seattle and Vancouver, they see the same stuff, but Vancouver doesn't have gun violence. Seattle does. I mean, and Windsor and Detroit. I mean, so it's a uniquely United States problem, and we have more gun violence than all 26 industrialized nations combined, and it's a choice. So I agree, it would be a bit of a distraction. There's no question. I mean, in my household, I support killing the TV and paying attention. And it is unconscionable what those video game companies are doing, as well as Hollywood, but we got to get the gun first, and we don't have to ban most guns, but we have to regulate them like every other country.
Please thank once more Kurt Andersen and John Rosenthal. We're going to close out the evening with some music. Mark, can I borrow your guitar? Thank you. Please welcome John Leventhal to the stage. I've sung in this church before. My daughters went to St. Luke's School, and I wrote a song with the first grade, and they sang it right here. Oh my God. And I love this community very much. I spent a lot of time here. This song is about praying even when the answers don't come.
I stand here by the western wall. Maybe a little of that wall stands inside of us all. I shove my prayers in the cracks. I got nothing to lose, no one to answer back. All these years I've brought up for review. I wasn't taught this, but I learned something new. I had to answer a distant call at the western wall. I've got a heart full of fear, and I offer it up on this altar of tears. Red dust settles deep in my skin. I don't know where it starts or where I begin. It's a crumbling pile of broken stones. It ain't much, but I'd not be home. If I ever loved a place at all, it's the western wall. I don't know if God was ever a man. If she was, I think I understand why he found a place to break his fall near the western wall.
Yeah, we got to do it. I'm going to do one more song. This is by, I don't usually sing this song, but it's by a guy named Bob Dylan.
Man thinks 'cause he rules the earth, he can do with it as he please. And if things don't change soon, he will. Man has invented his doom. First step was touching the moon. But there's a woman on my block. She just sit there, facing the hill. She say, who's gonna take away his license to kill? Now they take him and they teach him and they groom him for life, and they set him on a course where he's bound to get ill. Sell his body like they do used cars. But there's a woman on my block. She just sit there as the night grows still. She say, who's gonna take away his license to kill? Now he's hell-bent for destruction. He's afraid and confused, and his brain has been mismanaged with great skill. And all he believes are his eyes, and his eyes just tell him lies. But there's a woman on my block. She just sit there in a cold chill. She say, who's gonna take away his license to kill? Maybe noise maker, spirit maker, heartbreaker, backbreaker, no stone unturned. Might be an actor and a plot, might be all that you got till your error is clearly learned. Now he worships at an altar of a stagnant pool, and when he sees his reflection, he's fulfilled. Man is opposed to fair play. He wants it all and he wants it his way. But there's a woman on my block. She just sit there as the night grows still. She say, who's gonna take away his license to kill?
Thank you. Mark Erelli. One more song with Mark Erelli. Told you about this Twitter meeting with Mark, and this is the song he sent me on Twitter that had me in tears. And tell them what's happening with this song now, Mark.
So we've partnered up with Gabby Gifford's foundation, and we're basically giving them all all the proceeds from the song, everything that the song makes when it comes out on October 19th, goes right to the Gabby Giffords Foundation to support their efforts. And with Rosanne's help, we pulled together a pretty stellar cast of people to help me sing the song, including Rosanne, as well as Josh Ritter, Laurie McKenna, Anais Mitchell, and Cheryl Crow. And so it's a pretty great track, and 4 of those people can't be here tonight, so we're going to divvy it up between the 2 of us and finish up with this. So thanks again for listening. It's called By Degrees. When I take a look around me, sometimes I wish I was blind. It feels like something sacred's dying, one headline at a time. I can't tear myself away, no, I just stare in disbelief. You can learn to live with anything when it happens by degrees.
I've seen every head bowed down, as if lost in private prayer. Seen the phones in every hand, seen the long and vacant stare. Souls go numb and thumping through each ceaseless change and feed. You can learn to live with anything when it happens by degrees.
And I've seen pundits shouting back and forth across some great divide against a map of red and blue, points of view so cut and dry. When you look into the mirror, what color country do you see? Where you can learn to live with anything when it happens by degrees.
I've seen the flags at half-staff as the nation mourned and moaned. Seen the stars and bars of flag and drag above the State House dome. From the Charleston 9 we sing, once was blind but now I see. You can learn to live with anything when it happens by degrees.
And I've seen little hands on little shoulders, children in a line. I've seen them led away from school as the shots rang out inside. And I thought something had to change, but somehow it's become routine. We can learn to live with anything when it happens by degrees.
Seen sadness seep into my heart, each day a little more. Darkness growing so familiar, can't recall what came before.
My children's faces filled with questions, looking up expectantly, and I don't know what to tell them. No, I can't bring myself to tell them that you can learn to live with anything when it happens by degrees.
Thank you so much for coming out tonight.
Thank you. There's a reception in the back hall. Thank you. There's a reception in the back hall. Don't forget to donate to Stop Handgun Violence. Don't forget to vote. Thank you so much.